calling all psychonauts. May you enjoy the days through the haze. Enjoy what is now. This episode of the Slightly Fuzzed podcast is sponsored by Bud Tea Company, a cannabis apparel brand from Maine. Check them out at budteeco.com. That's BUDTEECO.com. Or follow them on Instagram at budteeco. Tell them Slightly Fuzz sent you. Okay, Kent Stump, guitarist, vocalist of WoFat. Thanks for
being
here.
How you doing? Glad to be here.
Well.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you being on, man. I've always been a fan of WoFat. Well, as long as I've been into this type of music, which isn't super long, but I consider WoFat one of those bands that's just kind of like the epitome of stoner metal. And
wow, cool.
You guys do a little bit of whatever it is that is stoner metal, like long songs, you have short songs, you have slow songs, you have fast songs, you have instrumental, you have vocals, you have a desert vibe, you have a space vibe, you have a swampy vibe. I mean, you kind of just bring it all in, and that's WoFat, in my opinion, which is very cool.
That's great to hear. I mean, I kind of feel like we do that too, but it's hard for me to be objective about things. So
yeah. So let's go back to like 2003, I think, is your first album. How long have you been a band? When did you guys get together?
Well, 2003 is really when we first started jamming together. Okay. It was 2006 before we actually got the first record finished and released it. So, but yeah, it's been that almost 20 years. Wow.
Almost 20 years.
Now that I think about it that way. Yeah. But it was a really slow start. Like we would get together and jam once every like couple of months or something, and so which is why it took like 3 years before we even had an album, but it was just kind of a slow thing that we started off. I had some ideas of some riffs and kind of what I wanted to do. Like I had played in a more kind of straight metal band prior to that with Michael, our drummer, in the late 90s, and then I discovered Fu Manchu like when The Action Is Goes came out. And that just kind of changed my whole thinking about things. And, in a way that kind of said, because my entire life I've been drawn to blues-based music, whether it's, funk, whether it's rock, whether it's, whatever it is. If it's blues-based, it's always been appealing to me. And, when I found Fu Manchu, it was like, wow, it's okay to just do like bluesy riffs. And so that was sort of part of the big impetus to start a band. And I also discovered around that same time stonerrock.com, and which was like a great resource back in like late 90s, early 2000s to find out about bands and find out about the genre. And so the original goal was like just maybe we'll play a few local gigs and see what happens, but yeah. I never thought that we'd be able to get still be playing this much longer or this much later. And also I never expected that we'd actually be able to do some of the cool things we've gotten to do, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I was thinking about it today, kind of how what did the scene look like back then? Because to me, back in 2003, I was in high school, and I mean, I talked about it on the last couple podcasts. New metal at that time was it. It was like it was Korn and Deftones, and even if you weren't into that, or if you were into that and more, it was at least heavy metal. It was Metallica, or even if you went further back, it was Judas Priest or Black Sabbath. But like, I didn't know that stoner rock, stoner metal was in existence. I didn't know that it existed at all. I mean, the closest I ever came was kind of digging the Queens of the Stone Age, like Songs for the Deaf around that time. And even then, I just thought they were just another rock band. I just thought they were like, an offshoot of Foo Fighters, Nirvana, like some kind of rock, grunge rock, something. It wasn't until years later where I started digging deeper and realizing that there was like this whole other genre that I didn't even know existed. So for you, what did that scene look like when you're getting together with these guys playing? You mentioned Fu Manchu kind of changing, your route in music, but was there a scene where you were at? Were there other bands playing this type of stuff? Like, how did you decide to kind of jump into this music that wasn't on radio, wasn't on MTV, wasn't being really promoted anywhere besides maybe where you were at?
Yeah, well, yeah, Dallas, like especially in the late '90s and early 2000s, the heavy music scene was like just totally focused on Pantera and bands that wanted to be Pantera essentially.
Yeah.
And which got I was I mean I loved Pantera, but it's that wasn't the music I wanted to do, and that whole kind of scene got really played out around here. But but I remember like so it would have been like maybe 99 2000 around there, going to South by Southwest like for a few years in a row, and it was right when Man's Ruin Records was still going, and that's how I discovered some of these bands was through Man's Ruin releases. And I don't know if you're hip to them, but there were like so many just seminal bands that Man's Ruin put out records like Acid King and Fatso Jetson, and all these great albums that Man's Ruin put out, and they had Man's Ruin showcase at South by Southwest that was like just it's crazy cool lineup, like with Acid King and Fatso Jetson and some of the bands I just mentioned, and then Fu Manchu's playing like next door with Queens of the Stone Age.
Wow.
And then like Drunk Horses playing across the street. It was just mind blowing, and like Earthride was playing. And, it was just this crazy. Like I was like, wow, I can't believe there's all these amazing bands. But as far as like the local scene, when we actually did start playing shows, there were a couple bands that were similar that we kind of got to know, and there was like early on, it was probably 2007 or 8. A guy that we know in a band called Kinnevetons he put together his Dallas Doom Days festival, which he managed to find bands from all over Texas that were either stonery or doomy or somewhat close, and it was kind of I think a good foundational thing for helping build the scene and kind of get the scene started for that kind of music here in Texas. Because Texas has like some great bands now. The scene has gotten a lot stronger, I think, since then.
Yeah, Texas has a lot of great bands, kind of in general, but I mean, especially for this kind of desert stoner stuff. I was going to ask about that too. Is like, what is the influence of Texas just as a whole in this type of music? Because it seems to be a lot of bands coming out in Texas, but even, I know you mentioned ZZ Top like on your bio on your website, and clearly ZZ Top has a big influence on WoFat just with the blues, but also just being a Texas band maybe. So what is it about Texas that brings out this heavy bluesy music?
I don't know. I mean, it's a lot of the bluesy history of Texas music, I think, is a big part of it. And like Johnny Winter and so many things, so many guys that have come from Texas, but just historically in the music, and the blues is just has always been a strong thing throughout the just the vibe of Texas music, and who knows, great Mexican food. It's hot. I don't know. I mean, it's also, I think, that Austin and the fact that we have like three, like, Austin, Houston, Dallas, and in San Antonio as well, we're all close enough, within 4 to 5 hours of each other, and they all have pretty good scenes, and you can sort of do like a little short circuit of shows, and it helps to build the scene of like statewide, regionally really well. And so everybody knows everybody else and plays shows with everybody else. And I don't know. I mean, it's hard to really, I don't know. I don't have a better explanation than that, other than I think it's just mainly like the blues, though, is the blues history of the state, and that is, stoner rock to me is like all about getting back to the roots of heavy metal and where it came from. Black Sabbath, those guys were huge fans of the blues.
Yeah. So you're starting WoFat, and obviously the blues has a lot to do with it, but what was your vision for the band at that point? Like trying to play a heavier blues, or was it to go like a stoner rock vibe like Fu Manchu? Was it to do a desert thing, a spacey thing? Like what were you envisioning with WoFat when you were first starting out this band?
But it's funny, like, but my very first thought with it was like around that same time I was listening to a lot of the early stoner rock stuff when I first discovered it. I was also listening to a lot of Junior Kimbrough and like Arl Burnside and those guys, that North Mississippi hill country blues, a trancey one chord blues, and so my original thought, I was also listening to a lot of John Lee Hooker, and it was my first idea was like, I want to do a band that's like basically that. It's like this trancey bluesy, simple, like trance inducing riff, but really heavy. And that was sort of the original idea. And it pretty immediately veered away from that, but that was the original sort of founding concept for me.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about your background in music in general, because it's interesting. I read that you actually went to school for like jazz studies. Is that right?
That is right. I went to the University of North Texas. I have a jazz performance degree from UNT. And
so what did you go to school like for? What was your goal with going to school at first? I mean, maybe for me, like I ended up with a certain degree, but I went there for something else. So what were you going for, and how did you end up with jazz studies?
Well, so when I went to UNT, and UNT's got a pretty renowned jazz school. And my plan when I got there, when I was 18 years old, was to graduate there, move to New York, and be a jazz musician. And while I was at college there, I'm, as always happens when you go to college, you meet a bunch of other people that are just have, introduce you to all kinds of new things. And, a lot of guys I knew is I hanging out with them is how I found out about heavier music, and, I went to, punk clubs here in Dallas in the 80s, which was crazy. The scene here was crazy. And, and I learned about Slayer and 80s hardcore and, Metallica and all that kind of stuff, which was like, this was not something I was really hip to before that. And so that kind of like I said, when the blues, like it has always been a drawing factor for me, but the intensity of metal and heavier music was also really appealing to me, especially coming from a jazz conceptually place of thinking about like John Coltrane and Miles Davis, and the intensity that those guys brought to the music, and which to me is like equally as heavy as any of the heaviest metal there is. But there seemed to be, in my mind, they both like made sense, conceptually and approach wise. And so it sort of was like that kind of changed my where what I wanted to do musically, So I didn't stick with wanting to just be strictly a jazz musician. I wanted to do other stuff that was heavier. Like,
did you look at it as like one is for fun and one is for a career? Like, did you think that like maybe there was money in jazz where metal was just going to be your hobby, or vice versa, or like?
Not really. I mean, I don't know that there's money in either, but
yeah.
But like, cause I did, like when I graduated, I did wacky gigs. I played on a cruise ship for a while. I, toured with a Broadway show, playing in a pit orchestra, things like that. And that kind of, I could make money doing that, but it really kind of burned me out on playing music, and I didn't want to play. If I had to do that to play music, I decided I didn't want to do that. Like playing wedding gigs and things like that.
Yeah.
And so it did, I guess in that sense. Yeah. So playing heavier music, riff-based music was, or I guess sort of a hobby or like a side thing that was fulfilling musically to me.
I asked not because I don't want to be like cliche and be like, well, you don't look like a jazz musician or anything like that, but like stoner metal is so interesting in that way, where you can kind of take all these different sounds and influences and put them in, and you can make a really like soft melodic record, or you can make a really hard, slow, sludgy record, and anything in between. So you're in a good spot, because if you were in some other genre, your jazz studies degree wouldn't come in handy.
But, yeah. I think that was one thing that kind of like drew me to the scene as well. It was the openness to experimentation and exploration, and just openness to other ideas. Like I said, in the 90s, Michael and I had a more kind of straight ahead metal band. And like that scene, like I said, is very Pantera focused, and it was also had a much more like I'm harder than you are kind of thing, and it's just like a lot of fronting and just people trying to be hardcore, and you know, and it's like I don't know, that's not why I'm playing music to do something like, you know, to get that kind of vibe. I just, you know, I just want to play music that's cool and that I dig.
I've kind of touched on that on the podcast before for my own history. It like I was into heavy metal. I was into Metallica and Megadeth and stuff, and then it kind of just got heavier from there, like Lamb of God and some of the newer metal bands. And at a certain point, not that I don't like that stuff anymore, I do, but it's got to a point where everyone was just kind of trying to like out heavy each other, how crazy each other. Like their album covers got crazier, their logos got crazier, their clothes, they got angrier, their screaming got angrier, and it was like,
yeah,
it got to a certain point where I was like, I don't even know if I enjoy listening to this actually.
Right. yeah
Like it was more of like a thing where I just liked saying that I was like, oh fuck yeah, I like as heavy as possible, you know. And at a certain point I was like, actually, you know what I really like is Queens of Stone Age, and they're not, you know, it's not like that at all. So you know, I kind of like steered away from it and got into all this music, all this desert and stoner and all that kind of stuff. But, so I haven't heard any like trombones or anything in WoFat yet. Is that coming? Are you going to incorporate more and more of this?
No,
pattern?
that won't be happening.
No. Did you play trombone?
I did. Yeah, when I was at UNT, but I literally haven't played it in probably 15 years. So
I played trombone in like middle school. I wanted to play drums. I couldn't do it. I couldn't hold a beat. So I got kind of a signed trombone. It was kind of like my second choice. And we didn't have any other trombone players. So like she was like, you're not going to play drums. You're going to play this. And cool. But that was in like 7th grade.
Awesome.
Yeah. So you have a recording studio also. I wanted to ask you about that. It's called Crystal Clear Sound and it's in Dallas. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Is that kind of your day job now?
That has been my day job for 20 plus years, actually. So Crystal Clear is a studio that's been in Dallas and opened in 1978. And as you know, it's actually at this point the longest consecutively open studio that's been in Dallas. And I started working there as a staff engineer in 1997. And then in 2013, Michael and I took over the ownership of the studio, and we've been running it ever since then. So yeah, it's like I said, it's my day job and how I make a living. And for better or worse, as a business owner, it's frightening, but also awesome at the same time. So
yeah, and I know you've recorded some bands that are definitely in this conversation. Mothership being one of them, which I'm a big fan of. What is it like working with these bands? I mean, do you just try to stick with one genre kind of like this, or do you find yourself just people walking in and being like, well, I got to record a pop song and I don't know how to record a pop song, but you know, and you just try to apply what you know to it?
Well, since the studio or Crystal Clear is, like I said, it's one of the most well-known studios in Dallas. And so when I first started working there, like just the whole, like it's never been completely focused on one genre of music. It's basically whoever calls and books time. And so, I learned, from a couple other older engineers that taught me a lot. And I sat in on a lot of sessions and learned by doing, recording gospel sessions and recording country sessions and doing jazz sessions and doing jingles and doing all this, like the whole gamut of stuff, and we still do that, like I was recording country just yesterday. This afternoon, I had some wacky session with these salesmen that are putting on some crazy show for their salesman club where they rewrote lyrics to a New Kids on the Block song. And, it's like, whatever. But then, I also, recorded this local band Realm Drifter, or their stuff is great. And it's like kind of electric wizardy. And, it's that's one thing I actually like a lot is the variety. I enjoy recording different types of music. Like I really enjoy recording country music because it's like you get to record fiddles, you get to record steel guitar, you get, it's like just it's really interesting to me, and
Yeah.
so I'm happy to not just be doing one genre, honestly.
How does it change how you approach WoFat at all? I mean, do you think more about how things are going to record as opposed to just being in a band and being like, some guy's going to figure that out? We just need to like play music.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it does change. I mean, I think I'm very obsessive about our recordings, and I've become more so over the years, I guess. But which I don't know if that's good or bad, but it definitely is. When we finally finish an album, like we just finally did in whenever that was, September, I guess, which had been long. Like we had actually started recording that like 2 years ago. But anyways, when we finally finish it, I'm like, man, I'm so glad to be done with that, because it's like I obsess over it for too long, and I have the freedom to obsess over it because I'm doing all the mixing and tracking, but it does make it hard, especially doing the tracking. It's hard to do the engineering side plus also to play. It's hard to sort of separate the minds of an engineer on one hand, performer on the other hand, producer somewhere else. So
Yeah.
it does make it hard, and there's times where I've thought, well, it'd be cool to maybe have somebody else engineer it or some, but then I also don't know if I can let go of the control to do that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So.
I mean, I would assume that you don't really have a preference then. It's just kind of, all the parts of what makes you is
Yeah, I think so.
The recording and playing.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what WoFat is working on now, or has worked on, I guess, as you said, in September. Was this kind of like a pandemic album? Were you guys sitting at home and working on this, or were you guys getting together, or was this kind of always been in the works? Because it's been a little while since you put out your last album.
It's been way too long, actually. But it was probably actually, there was so much of it that we had done, like especially in terms of writing prior to the pandemic. But I think this record, I think weirdly, just it took longer for a couple of reasons. One, partly just one, we got a new bass player in 2016, which that was a long time ago, but he's still this is his first record he played for studio record he's playing with us. But that sort of that coupled with the fact that we're all full-time employed and running businesses, each of us, and and then also trying to do what touring we're able to do. We didn't spend a lot of time those first maybe year or two after we got Zach doing new stuff at all. And so it kind of took a while to sort of, before we got back into that creative frame of mind. And so that kind of, like I said, set us back a couple of years. And then after that, it just, I don't know, for whatever reason, it just took longer the writing process. Just, I don't know, something took longer this time. But actually at this point, now that it's done, I'm more excited about this record than any one that we've done. I think it's our best thing so far, but I don't know. I mean, the pandemic also did kind of slow things down, because the plan was, before the pandemic hit, we were going to have it done like that summer of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
That was the plan, because we had pretty much everything written at that point. We had a good bit of it recorded already. And so we were going to really focus hard, get it done. And then the pandemic hit, which meant we didn't actually get together for, what was that, like maybe 8 months or something like that before we got together again.
Yeah. So how is the sound? How has the group changed over the years? I know you've had some lineup changes. Has the focus changed at all on the aesthetic, on the vibe, on whether you want to stay heavy blues or kind of space metal or stoner metal or desert rock, or have you changed up anything over the years, or how do you feel about it?
I think it has changed. I think this record is more of a departure maybe than any of them
really
so far. And it's, part of that one is having Zach, and Zach brings just a very strong and individual voice to the bass playing aspect of things, which adds just another dimension to the whole whole band vibe and the whole groove, which is really cool, and has changed kind of thinking a little bit in terms of the songwriting. But also with this album, I think I maybe haven't been listening to as much heavier stuff, and maybe I've been listening to a little more jammy kind of, and also maybe spacey stuff that has kind of influenced the writing a little bit. So this record, maybe I would say, has a little bit more of the jamminess to it, and also I would say has more of a like 70s fusion influence to it. And it's not maybe as strictly bluesy in terms of the riffs. Like there's a little more expanding beyond just a blues melodic paradigm,
Yeah.
So to me, it's more varied, I think, in terms of the grooves overall, and kind of goes some places that we haven't really gone before, I would say.
Cool. Well, it sounds exciting, and I guess I should have probably mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast, but we have a song to play from this new record. All right, the Snows of Banquo. Is that how you say it? 4?
Yeah, that's how I'm saying it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'll give you a little backstory on this song. So
Okay.
a friend of mine has he owns a game company, and his game company they're called Tuesday Night Games actually, and one of the games that they make is a sci-fi horror RPG role playing game, and it's called Mothership, coincidentally. But so he had contacted me about he had an idea of because like with this game, it's similar to like D&D or something where like they'll have modules that are different scenarios that you can play through if you're playing the game. And so he had come up with a module called the Snows of Banquo IV, and was asking me like his idea was originally to do a flexi disc and have us do a song, and they would release a flexi disc with the module. And since then, it's kind of grown, and he may actually end up doing like a full LP and have some other bands on there too. But anyway, so the original idea was, we talked about his concept of what the storyline for this sci-fi horror thing was, and then I wrote the song and wrote the lyrics kind of based on that. And and I knew like the whole time I wanted to also put this on the album because I was excited about the song, and it also kind of fits with the album because the album is very much more of a sci-fi kind of theme and futuristic in terms of what it's talking about, and on all the other songs. But when it was his story concept also kind of worked with me metaphorically to talk about some things politically, just in terms of like disinformation and like hive mind, and how you can be led into just a place of madness, and by just being fed the wrong types of information and things like that. But so that was kind of just as a metaphorical thing that I had in my mind. But anyway, so that's the story with the song and the title and all that. And I'm not sure when they're going to release I think the release of the module will probably be kind of close to the album release time too. So
Do you have an album release time in mind?
I don't know the exact date, but we're releasing on Ripple, and basically because of the vinyl backup in terms of getting vinyl pressed, it's probably going to be May. So, which is a real bummer for me because like I said, I'm really happy, but I'm excited about this record, and it's kind of a drag to have to wait till May to really put it out. But it is.
Do you have a name for the album?
The name or the album is called The Singularity.
Singularity. Cool. I'm looking forward to it, man. I've spent the last like week or so listening to a lot of WoFat. So I'm super pumped for it. I love the song, and I appreciate you letting us play it on this thing. So very cool, and I'm definitely looking forward to that.
Yeah. So like I said, you're the world premiere, so nobody else is
very cool.
It, so
yeah. I hope everyone likes it. I certainly did. So right on, man. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Speaking of random little projects like that you're contributing songs to, I kind of wanted to ask you about this project called Planet of Doom.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about this project? This was years ago, quite a few years ago now at this point. I don't know, like 7 years ago, I think, when I first kind of found out about it. And it was really because I follow a lot of artists. Before I really got into music, this music specifically, and started Slightly Fuzzed or anything like that, I was just an artist and a graphic designer, and I'm a sucker for animation. And I found out about this Planet of Doom project, and I'm like, this is going to be great. It's like heavy metal, but like stoner Doom style, And people they had like a Kickstarter at the time. You kick in money, and then they started kind of slowly announcing the bands and some of the artists. And that was so long ago, and I haven't heard anything about it really in a long time. But I know that you guys were going to do a track for it, right?
Yeah, we did a track for it, and it's still going to happen. David, Paul Seymour, and Tim Grounda, they're the ones that are doing it. And the reason it's taking so long is mostly because Tim is working on the animation by himself. He's one guy, and they don't have, like, they did the Kickstarter to help get some funds to get things going, but the budget to have like multiple animators to really make this thing move quickly isn't there. And I did talk to David. When was that? A few months ago, and they were hoping to get some more funding from some actual companies that would help do a wide release of it.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the timeline is yet. But I know it's going to happen at some point, and I'm still really stoked about it. I think it's going to be awesome when it finally comes out.
It's gonna be awesome. They've released a couple like different clips over the
Yeah.
year, on Instagram or YouTube or something, and just short clips with some heavy music behind it. And I'm like, God, this is so fucking awesome. But it's got to take forever to get like an hour and a half worth together because they're sharing, like 20 seconds worth of clips at a time. So
yeah, well, that's the other thing is like having the artists, that are contributing to it. They're doing a bunch of pieces that they're using for, creating animation from, and so it's pretty complex process, I think, for them to create. So
yeah. Well, I think they should reopen the Kickstarter at this point because, I think they can get a lot more people involved at this point, and I would certainly kick in more money for that thing because I'd love to see it finished.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So I have a segment called Dumb Questions.
Uh-oh.
And I'm going to ask you a series of dumb questions, and feel free to answer in a dumb way or a thoughtful way. It's up to you. So.
Oh, you cut out. Hang on.
All right. Well, I don't know where it cut out. I don't know where it cut out.
I got you back now. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So dumb questions. I'm going to ask you a series of dumb questions, and you can answer in a dumb way or a thoughtful way. The choice is yours. First question.
All right.
In light of our nation's obesity issues, would you ever consider changing your name to WoFat?
No, but maybe WoFat?
Why fat also works.
I don't know.
Question number 2. Percentage-wise, how much of The Gathering Dark was inspired by the Insane Clown Posse's annual The Gathering of the Juggalos?
Almost all of it, actually.
Almost all of it.
Like I said, I was in early 2000s. Now, I'll sort of side story.
Sure.
So this would have been right around, probably, like 2001, 2002, maybe something like that. When I hadn't been working in the studio all that long. I'd been there for a few years, and I actually did a session with those guys, and because they were on the road with this band called Twisted, and they basically came in, one day, like they had the show the night before, I think, or maybe they had the show that following night. I don't remember, but they came in, reeking of multiple things, lack of shower, lots of smoking, and it was a pretty simple session. I didn't do a lot. I did like just a bunch of like digital editing for various things for this Twisted album, but so yeah, so I did meet those guys. They were kind of strange. Not the most friendly guys I've ever met, but it was fine, and it was interesting. So I don't know, but no, honestly, it didn't influence The Gathering Dark at all. So
okay, fair enough. All right, question number 3. As a touring band, you're eating a lot of food on the road, and what food makes WoFat say "Wo fart"?
Jeez. I don't know. Mexican food? I don't know. That's yeah, I love it. Yeah, we'll go with that. We'll go with Mexican food. Tex-Mex.
You should be used to Tex-Mex by now.
Yeah. I love Tex-Mex.
You're a spacey, deserty band, and Star Wars is a spacey, deserty movie. Would you consider a Star Wars concept album and call it Boba Fett?
Maybe, actually. I always like Boba Fett, so yeah. That actually might be. You may have just inspired the next record.
Are you a Star Wars fan?
Well, I was a Star Wars fan when it first came out, and then I've kind of been disappointed with the newer movies.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of the newer ones, but I've seen like the the 6 or whatever.
Yeah, like when the very first one came out in like 1977 or whatever, I saw it like multiple times in the theater.
What is the deal with Boba Fett? I don't ever understand really why everyone loves Boba Fett so much.
Well, all I know him from is from the original movies, so
Yeah.
I don't really know what his status is now. But he always just seemed like a mysterious, cool looking dude to me. But
Okay. Because people seem to love him, and he just seemed like this like such a small character.
Yeah,
to me from seeing the movies, not very frequently, but anyway.
But I guess to me, it's like it's the mystery of him. I think
Okay.
What's his backstory? It seems like he's got a pretty interesting backstory. So
well, you can write a whole album about it. All right. Question number 5. You have a song called Analog Man. Joe Walsh of the Eagles has a song and an album called Analog Man.
Oh, really? I didn't even know that. Wow.
You have a song called The Wolf, and Joe Walsh has a song called Wolf. You have The Midnight Cometh. Joe Walsh has Midnight Man and Midnight Moody's. So the question is, how long has Joe Walsh been in WoFat?
Well, he's actually played all the guitar parts. I'm his body double.
My original question for that was going to be something about how the song Analog Man was supposed to be called Anal OG Man, but due to a typo, it came out as Analog Man on the album sleeve.
Somehow we always have a trouble with people not putting a space between Wo and Fat, so it wouldn't surprise me. Yeah.
Well, as I was doing some like research to see if you had ever done a single artwork for Analog Man or music video or anything, I went down this Joe Walsh rabbit hole because I found Analog Man. So that's where that question came from. If you're wondering how I got there. Okay, so this is a good one. WoFat is named after a villain in Hawaii Five-0. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. But since you're a Texas band, which villain from Walker, Texas Ranger would you pick as a band name? Running Wolf, Max Slater, Vince Pike, or Cliff Eagleton?
I'd probably have to go with Vince Pike just because of the Pike reference with old Matt.
These were my favorites, so it's a tough call, but Vince Pike is definitely a good one.
Yeah, I'd go with that.
Okay, Vince Pike. All right, that was dumb questions.
Right on.
Well, I appreciate your time, man. That's about all I got for you. I appreciate you letting us play a single for everybody. I appreciate you talking about the early days of some of this music and what it was like in WoFat. So
yeah, my pleasure, man. Thank you.
All right. We'll stay in touch, man. I'm looking forward to the album when it comes out, and hopefully it's sooner than later.
Right on.
All right. Later.
Bye.